Hello and welcome to Talking Leadership. This is Eric Perez welcoming you back to our fifth in the series of the Emerging Leaders podcast series. It's great to have my next guest with me. Again, for those that are listening, I'd like to thank again Sydney Fish Markets for their support of the podcast process. It's been quite good, and I've now hit around 30 podcasts in the last 6 weeks, which is great. Looks like the topic area is one of significant interest. So on with the show. So my next guest, as in terms of a bit of a background to what he's doing at the moment, he's a third-year university student at Sydney University, undertaking the Bachelor of Food and Agribusiness. He's also been involved with AgriFutures Australia as a Horizon Scholar, as well as part of the first cohort of the Evoke Ag Future Young Leader program. So can I welcome to the podcast Matthew Nevison? How are you, Matthew?
Good, thanks, Eric. And yourself?
Mate, I'm brilliant for a, Wednesday morning. Look, I know you're busy, and thank you for your time. So, Matt, can I start with the first question here? Why have you taken on some of the leadership roles you've taken on, mate?
I think it's just a good way of getting involved into the wider community. I think a good way to look at leadership is being passionate about the areas that you are and giving it back to the wider community. So a lot of the leadership roles that I've taken on are voluntary, and I see it as a way of getting involved, meeting new people, and expanding the horizons of my understanding in terms of the agricultural industry.
Okay, so so this has been just to unpack that a bit. You've done this on purpose to try and hone your skills in that leadership space. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, you are. I think for me, I don't have any agricultural background at all. I'm not from the land. So it's important for me to discover what I do and don't like in terms of it's such a broad industry that has a lot of width in terms of fisheries like yourself or broad-acre cropping. So I think getting into leadership roles, I get to discover are very personal by talking to people, networking, understanding the areas that are interesting to me that I can then go and pursue in the future, and then also developing my skills, interpersonal skills and whatnot.
That's fantastic to hear, mate, because like yourself, I didn't have a background in fisheries, and I've been in the Queensland fisheries for the last 10 years, and there's still things I don't know 100%. So learning is an ongoing things in these industries. So it's great to hear that someone without an ag background is prepared to get in and give it a go. So, look, I'll start with the first question I've got here around leader capabilities. So, from your travels, what do you think are the most critical leader capabilities you've seen in others around you, Matt?
I think the one thing that I look for in a leader that is a successful leader or someone that I can respect in a leadership role is being interesting and interested. There's two parts to that, and I think I should unpack that a bit more. To be interesting is most successful leaders influence others around them in a positive way, and it's about building a community under a common goal or ideal. And I think for me, the interesting term comes into play when exploring areas such as agriculture and finding things you're passionate about. And that's whether that's bridging the rural to urban divide. I've heard that come up a fair bit on this podcast, or developing strategies for regenerative agriculture. And I think that passion is infectious to the spheres of your influence or social circles. So that really unpacks the interesting part, influencing others around you through your passion for a certain goal. And then the interested part, I think that comes down to how a leader interacts with others. It encompasses more of the emotional and social intelligence side of people management and the aspect of a successful leader. It means being mindful of others around you and being interested in their opinions and feelings. And I think that really comes into play when endeavouring in a project or a group task. I think that's what real successful leaders should strive for, being mindful of others around them and building a team and community to achieve what they want to achieve.
Wow. Okay. Well, let me know when you get to that role. I'll come and work for you, mate. Sounds like you've got your head screwed on right. So one thing to follow up on, and I'll use the word that you use that I've used, unpacking this a bit. The rural city divider, that's been brought up a few times, and I haven't gone into it to my detriment in a lot more detail. I just need to ask you, so in your travels again, what do you see as that divide looking like, and how does then leadership fit into trying to fix, if that's the right word, or deal with that divide as you see it?
Yeah, so I think the biggest divide that there is the lack of transparency in our agri-food supply chain. I mean, we interact, we wear the clothes from agricultural supply chains, we eat the food 3 times a day. I think the common consumer nowadays is becoming more conscious of that. So I think there's still a long way to go. You might be appreciative of where something has come from, whether it's paddock to plate with your meat or wine or seafood even. But I think there's a long way to go in terms of breaking down that transparency right from the producer end all the way through to the end of the consumer end of the supply chain. And I think to answer that second part of the question, how can leadership go about changing that? I think successful leadership in the ag tech space, that can break down a lot of the barriers we have, whether that's using Internet of Things or more big data to overcome some of the transparency issues. One of the things that I've worked on with food agility is looking at a case study for the Sydney fish market to use blockchain and IoT to track the freshness of fish from the catch to the consumer for online marketplace. And I think something like that, leaders in their respective fields of each industry, we can push for using new strategies like technology or anything else to include that transparency the whole way through. I think it's very easy for the consumer to appreciate where their food or clothes are coming from. I think it's up to us as the agricultural industry to enable that through whatever means necessary.
Yeah, okay. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's an issue in the sector that I represent, and it's a shame because some have said to me that have been in this industry, and some on the land that have been in there for a long time, as in multi-generational connections with agriculture, that we may have had that in the past, and somehow it's lost to us, and now we have to reinvent what that looks like to maintain our support with the community. I'm not necessarily of the opinion we've lost all of that social license, because the measuring of what that social license is has always been difficult to do, and I believe it's there. I just think, and this is a personal view, that we've lost our ability to interpret what that looks like, and to make sure that those people in the community that have a concern about that have the information to make informed decisions, because not everyone has a concern around this. And I guess it's targeting those that do, to be able to have a what they might call a meaningful conversation. Look, thank you for unpacking that, and the fact that our emerging leaders have got this front and center of mind is something that existing leaders would be very happy about, particularly in the ag space. Matt, can I bring you to a question around emerging versus established leaders? So what do you believe, again, in your experience, emerging leaders bring to the table that established leaders don't?
Yeah, I think the pretty stock standard answer, which I've heard a few times before on this podcast, and in no way it's wrong. I believe it wholeheartedly myself. I think emerging leaders can contribute new and diverse ideas into the field of agriculture. I think like myself, if you get someone from outside of agriculture bringing new opinions, maybe not all of them are correct, but I think that brings a level of necessary diversity into the field. I think if you also look at one of the other future young leaders, Reali, she talks about the importance of diversity in agriculture and the benefits it can have. So I think the first part is, bringing new messages and diverse ideas into the field of agriculture. And I think also being a younger person with no obligation to not speak their mind, I think that is also a positive thing sometimes. We can speak for the consumer trends that the younger generation are having. We can really speak our mind on the topics that will be important in the coming years.
That's brilliant. And so, as a lead into the next question, I was going to ask you: has the industry you've worked in shaped your leadership? So you said you're not from the ag sector. So how would you describe where you were post pre getting into agriculture? Sorry.
So in terms of to answer the leadership side of things, I think as I kind of might answer a few questions that you might have ahead, but I think for me, I've developed as a leader through experiences. I think whether that's small or large interactions with people I've had along the way in different roles, like in school with cadets and rugby, learning different leadership models, and I think finding the one that suits me and my personality best. I think that's whether you can experience that through agriculture or not. I think that's where people approach their leadership style is through experience and through informal or formal mentors, and kind of modeling yourself after the person that you want to try and achieve to be.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fine, and it partly answers some of the questions I had, but we'll get into a bit more detail in a second. So you said you've done a lot of volunteer, you've taken a lot of volunteer roles that have helped you to shape the kind of leader that you might want to be. Is there a particular form of leader development that you've undertaken, again, through these voluntary processes that stood out for you? So are you more a book type person, online webinars, or going to workshops and so on? Like, do you have a preference in that regard?
Yeah, I like books. For me, reading books and learning from them I think it's maybe a part of my larger social group. We like to read a lot of self-help books or books that give insights to what leaders should be or the traits of successful people. So I think I definitely attribute some of my beliefs to what I've read. Probably if I had to name a number one book for that, that'd probably be Ray Dalio's most recent book. And that really outlined what the distinction between what is a successful leader and what isn't.
Yeah, okay. And so that just to reiterate, to go back and unpack that a little bit. So you're drawing from multiple experiences, including those of a not necessarily academic nature, but from people that have written their life experiences down, and that segues quite nicely into the next question. Do you have a view on lifelong learning, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. I think that also feeds into the interesting side of a good leader. I think, especially in agriculture, it's critical to attain an agile and dynamic approach to leadership in an industry where there's going to be so many challenges in the 21st century and beyond. So I think lifelong learning is absolutely essential. And for me personally, I like knowing things. I like knowing everything about topics and subjects. So I'm a criminal for ending up on very tangential internet searches and reading all about topics. So I think for me, lifelong learning is just going to happen because of general curiosity. But I think in general, it's a critical part of being an agile and dynamic leader.
Brilliant. Okay, and that has come up a few times, not just in these podcasts, but in the other series of podcasts that I'm doing. That there's a potential to become stagnant in terms of your thinking as a leader if you're not looking to learn from multiple experiences, be that formal learning or informal learning, because it's not about always post high school training and so on. Look, I might move to leadership models if that's okay, and around mentoring. So you did mention mentoring. Have you had formal or informal mentoring experiences, and how did that go, Matt?
I've never had a formal mentor, but I've had a lot of individuals who played significant parts in my personal development and the ways that I view leadership and leadership roles. I think that's come down to being involved in whether it be rugby or cadets at school and trying to find myself in leadership roles in both of those aspects of school, and then back through uni as well, looking at the roles that I do in society, the agricultural society. So I think it's the little interactions that you get, and you can take a piece of learning from all those interactions, and that builds to give you a better aggregate picture of what I believe is a successful leader.
Yeah, brilliant. So again, another successful segue into my next question. Do you think there's such a thing as a perfect leader?
No, I don't. And I think a perfect leader is probably someone who recognizes that. I think, even though that's a bit of a contradiction, I think there's no such thing as a perfect leader. And I think acknowledging the weaknesses that you have and trying to work not so much on what you do know, but handling what you don't know, I think that's a really critical part, and remaining humble and insightful to what others can provide for you and to what you want to achieve as an individual as part of the bigger group.
Finally, and this one has drawn some interesting commentary, and I'm sure I'm going to get that when I pose this question to you, or make the statement. Sorry, leaders are born, not made. What's your view on that, Matt?
I think I could convince myself either way on that one. But for the sake of keeping it brief, I think I'll go into their made. Touching a lot of things that I've already mentioned before. I think leaders represent the culmination of their experiences and the ideals that they've grown passionate about and they want to embody. So I think I'll sit with the leaders are made, not born.
Okay. For my 2 cents, I'm still on the fence on that one for lots of different reasons. But that's great. And so that brings us to the end of the podcast. And I'd like to thank you again. And
that's right. It's been a real big pleasure coming on.
On behalf of Talking Leadership, this is Eric Perez, and I'll catch you all on the next podcast. Thanks, mate.
Thank you very much.